I was arranging coffee beans in my display case when the familiar sound of Italian leather shoes echoed through my empty shop. It was 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the official opening of the daily grind, and my brother-in-law Richard was early for his scheduled mockery. "James, this is just sad," he said, adjusting his Rolex. "A man your age, starting a coffee shop, after 15 years in corporate finance. At 45, I'd invested my entire severance package from my former banking position into this small corner space in downtown Boston. The shop was modest, exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood furniture, and a carefully restored 1950s espresso machine that had taken me months to perfect. "Good morning to you too, Richard," I replied, continuing to arrange my carefully sourced beans. Each variety had been selected through months of research and tasting, built on relationships with small farms and ethical suppliers. "Sarah is worried about you," he continued, referring to my sister. "First the divorce, then quitting Morgan Stanley, and now this." He gestured around the space as if it were a crime scene. The bell above the door chimed again. Sarah walked in, designer handbag swinging, her face set in that familiar expression of disapproval she perfected since marrying into old money. "James, this has to stop," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "Do you know how embarrassing this is? My friends keep asking if you're having a midlife crisis." I switched on my pride and joy. A custom-modified La Marzocco espresso machine I'd spent 6 months restoring. The gentle hum of the machine filled the space, a sound more comforting than the opening bell of the stock exchange had ever been. "Would either of you like a coffee?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm testing a new single-origin bean from a small farm in Guatemala." "We have a Starbucks account," Richard said dismissively. "Listen, James, be reasonable. This little experiment is going to fail. You have no business experience in retail or hospitality." What Richard didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the last 5 years of my banking career studying the coffee industry. Every vacation had been a research trip to coffee farms. Every weekend had been spent learning from master roasters. My garage had been converted into a testing lab for roasting profiles and brewing methods. "The location's all wrong," Sarah added, looking around the shop with disdain. "This neighborhood is dead. No foot traffic. I'd chosen this location precisely because it was off the beaten path. The rent was reasonable, and the neighborhood was changing. New tech startups were moving in, along with young professionals who appreciated quality coffee. Your money would have been better invested in Richard's hedge fund," Sarah continued. "He could have doubled it by now." I finished preparing the machines for opening. "I appreciate your concern, but this is what I want to do." "What you want to do?" Richard scoffed. "What about what you should do? You had a career, respect, a future. Now you're going to be serving coffee to hipsters." The first rays of morning sun filtered through the large windows, catching the brass accents of my restored espresso machine. In an hour, the shop would fill with the aroma of freshly ground coffee and fresh baked goods from the local bakery I'd partnered with. "James," Sarah's voice softened slightly, "is this about Catherine? Because if you're trying to prove something to your ex-wife—" "This has nothing to do with Catherine," I said firmly. "This is about doing something I'm passionate about." Richard checked his phone, probably monitoring some market opening. "Passion doesn't pay bills. 60% of new businesses fail in the first year. Restaurants and cafes, it's more like 80%. Then I'll be in the 20% that succeed," I replied, starting my opening routine. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers coming in 15 minutes." They left, their parting comments a mixture of concern and condescension. Through the window, I watched them walk to Richard's Mercedes, already on their phones, probably sharing their concerns about my mental state with the family. My first employee, Mike, arrived shortly after. He was a barista with competition experience who'd chosen my small shop over larger chains because, as he'd said in his interview, You respect the craft. Was that your sister's car I saw leaving? He asked, putting on his apron. Yes, and my brother-in-law's. They're concerned about my financial decisions. Mike laughed as he started checking the Grindr settings. Wait until they see what's coming out in Coffee Culture magazine next week. I'd forgotten about that. A coffee blogger had discovered the Daily Grind during our soft opening. He'd spent hours watching our pour-over technique, asking about our bean selection process, and learning about our unique roasting profiles. At exactly 7:00 a.m., I unlocked the door. Our early regulars, a growing group of locals who appreciated our commitment to quality, began trickling in. Each customer received the same attention to detail, whether they ordered a simple drip coffee or our signature single-origin pour-over. By 8:30, we had our first morning rush. Mike managed the espresso drinks while I handled pour-overs and customer interaction. Each cup was prepared with precision and care, each bean ground to order. Boss. Mike called out between drinks, Table 3 wants to know about our roasting process. I smiled as I finished a perfect rosetta on a latte. Trade secret. I called back, the same answer I'd given countless times to competitors trying to understand our unique flavor profiles. The morning rush gave way to a steady stream of customers. Many were regulars who discovered us during our first month, drawn by the quality of our coffee and the atmosphere of the shop. My phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah. Your nephew's trust fund could cover your losses when this fails. Just think about it. I set the phone aside and focused on preparing another pour-over. The careful circular motion of the water over the grounds, the precision of the timing, the attention to temperature. This was what the Daily Grind was about. Not proving anything to anyone, but creating something exceptional. By mid-morning, we'd served more customers than any previous day. The word was spreading, helped by social media posts from customers sharing photos of our latte art and unique preparation methods. Between rushes, I conducted a coffee tasting session with a group of customers interested in our new beans, teaching them about flavor notes, explaining the importance of elevation and processing methods. This was what I'd dreamed of while sitting through endless financial meetings. A food critic from the local paper came in unannounced, but I recognized him from my research. He ordered our signature pour-over and spent an hour taking notes. Mike whispered that he'd seen him return 3 times in the past week. The afternoon brought another surprise. Catherine, my ex-wife, walked in. She looked out of place in her corporate attire, standing in line with creative professionals and tech workers. James, she said when she reached the counter, I heard about this place. At the office, actually. People are talking. I prepared her drink personally, an oat milk latte with an extra shot, her usual order during our marriage. Good things, I hope. She took a sip, her eyes widening slightly. This is different. Better than what I remember you making at home. I've learned a few things since then. She lingered, watching the operation of the shop. You seem happy. Happier than I've seen you in years. I was spared from responding by the arrival of the afternoon rush. Catherine left, but not before I saw her take a few photos of the space. After closing, as Mike and I cleaned the equipment to my exacting standards, he asked, Did you see the online reviews? We're trending on local food blogs. I continued cleaning the espresso machine, each part receiving careful attention. The Daily Grind wasn't about trending or proving points. It was about doing one thing exceptionally well. That evening, alone in the shop, I roasted a small batch of beans for the next day. The process required complete focus, monitoring temperature, listening for the crack, watching the color development. This was what I'd left banking for, the pursuit of perfection in something I truly loved. Sarah called again, but I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I focused on cupping the latest roast, noting the flavor profile, adjusting my plans for tomorrow's batch. Because sometimes success isn't measured in dollar signs or social status. Sometimes it's measured in the perfect cup of coffee, in customers who become friends, in doing what you love regardless of others' expectations. 3 months after opening the Daily Grind, I faced an unexpected dilemma: how to handle a feature in Coffee Culture magazine while maintaining our quality with increasing demand. The pathetic coffee shop my family had dismissed was now being hailed as Boston's premier specialty coffee destination. James, Mike called out one morning, wrestling with our overflowing reservation book. The Specialty Coffee Association wants you to judge their regional barista championship, and there's a roasting competition they'd like you to evaluate. I focused on the pour-over I was preparing, maintaining the precise circular motion that had become second nature. Success had brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. Every cup still needed to be perfect, no matter how many people were waiting. The bell chimed, and Richard walked in, looking different from his last visit. The smirk was gone, replaced by what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "James, we need to talk," he said, settling at the counter. "Mine Investment Group. They're interested in expanding the Daily Grind concept. We could open locations across New England." I continued my methodical pour-over preparation. The Daily Grind isn't meant to be a chain, Richard. It's about quality, not quantity. He watched me work, his banker's mind probably calculating potential profits. "Do you realize how much money you're leaving on the table? Your current revenue numbers are impressive, but with expansion." The door chimed again, and Sarah entered with a group of her country club friends. My sister had changed over the past months, her initial embarrassment fading as the Daily Grind gained recognition. "James," she said, approaching the counter, "everyone at the club is talking about your Guatemalan roast. Mrs. Winchester wants you to do a coffee tasting at her charity event." I handed off the completed pour-over to its waiting customer. "We do educational tastings here at the shop on Sundays. She's welcome to join." The morning progressed into our usual rush, now a carefully orchestrated dance of precision and efficiency. Mike handled the espresso bar while I managed pour-overs and roasting questions. Every drink received the same attention, whether for a coffee critic or a first-time customer. Between rushes, I found Richard still at the counter, watching our operation with analytical eyes. "You've created something special here," he admitted, sipping his third cappuccino. "But it's wasted on such a small scale. Let me help you grow this." I started preparing another batch of beans for roasting. "The scale is exactly what makes it special, Richard. You can't mass-produce passion." Sarah lingered after her friends left, watching me work the roaster. "I didn't understand before," she said quietly, "why you left banking. But watching you here, you never looked this alive in a suit." The afternoon brought an unexpected visit from Catherine and her new husband, a tech executive who'd been hearing about the Daily Grind in startup circles. "James," Catherine said, genuine surprise in her voice, "this is incredible. The office orders delivery from here every morning now. There's actually a waiting list for your coffee subscription service." I focused on adjusting the roaster temperature, monitoring the beans' development. "Quality takes time," I said, remembering how she had once mocked my obsession with coffee during our marriage. Her husband, David, watched the roasting process with interest. "Have you considered an app? For orders, subscriptions, coffee education?" My development team could. "We have a website," I interrupted gently. Sometimes simpler is better. Later that afternoon, during our daily cupping session, Mike announced that Coffee Culture magazine wasn't just featuring us. They wanted to put the Daily Grind on their cover. "Boss," he said, "do you realize what this means? We'll have coffee tourists from all over the country." I considered this while evaluating the day's roast. "Then we'll teach them about good coffee, one cup at a time." Richard returned before closing, this time with a formal proposal. "At least look at the numbers, James. We could make this the next Blue Bottle or Intelligentsia." I handed him our last pour-over of the day. "Sit with that coffee for a minute, Richard. Really taste it. That's what the daily grind is about. Not numbers, not expansion, but that perfect cup. He took a sip, then another, his expression changing. I've never actually tasted coffee like this. How do you? That's why we stay small, I said. Every bean, every roast, every cup gets this level of attention. The next morning, Sarah arrived early, wearing casual clothes instead of her usual designer outfit. Teach me, she said, watching me set up the roaster. About coffee, about roasting. I want to understand what you see in this. For a moment, I saw my little sister again, before country clubs and social climbing had taken over her life. Start with the basics, I said, showing her how to check the green beans for quality. As we worked, she asked, how did you know this would succeed? Starting over at 45? I didn't, I admitted, teaching her to listen for the first crack in the roasting beans. I just knew I had to try. The morning passed in a blur of coffee education, brother and sister working side by side. Sarah's first roasting attempt wasn't perfect, but her enthusiasm was genuine. James, she said before leaving, clutching a bag of her own roasted beans, Richard's investment group is still interested, but I get it now, why you want to keep it small. The daily grind continued to flourish, not because we were trendy or ambitious, but because we remained true to our founding principle: exceptional coffee, perfectly prepared, served with knowledge and passion. Coffee Culture magazine's cover story dubbed us the anti-chain, where coffee meets craftsmanship, but that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was in the quiet moments. Teaching curious customers about brewing methods, watching Sarah learn to appreciate the nuances of different beans, seeing Richard finally understand that success isn't always measured in expansion plans. Because sometimes the smallest dreams create the most perfect results, and the best revenge against mockery is simply doing what you love exceptionally well. 6 months into running the daily grind, I faced an invitation that once would have seemed impossible. The James Beard Foundation wanted to feature our coffee program in their Innovation in Beverage series. The pathetic coffee shop had caught the attention of the culinary world's most prestigious organization. James, Sarah said one morning, watching me dial in the espresso grind, Richard's firm is hosting their annual investor meeting. They want the daily grind to cater it. I adjusted the grinder by a fraction of a millimeter. We don't do off-site service, Sarah. The coffee wouldn't be the same. They're offering 5 figures for a 2-hour event. It's not about the money, I replied, pulling a test shot. It's about doing it right. The morning light filtered through our windows, catching the steam from the espresso machine. The shop had evolved subtly over the months. New shelving for our retail beans, a small library of coffee literature, and a dedicated cupping table for educational sessions. Mike arrived early, as usual, already reviewing the day's roasting schedule. He'd grown from an experienced barista into a true coffee artisan, sharing my dedication to perfection. Boss, he called out, that coffee journalist from London is coming today. The one who wrote out the death of craft coffee at the hands of chains. I nodded, focusing on the espresso preparation. He'll either understand what we're doing or he won't. We just do what we do. The morning progressed with our usual precision. Each drink crafted perfectly, each customer interaction meaningful. The London journalist arrived mid-morning, ordered a pour-over, and sat quietly observing our operation. Richard appeared around lunch without his usual entourage of investment bankers. James, he said, settling at the counter, I've been thinking. What if, instead of expanding the daily grind, we create a training program? Teach other coffee shops your methods. I paused in my brewing. This was new. Richard thinking beyond simple multiplication of profits. The world needs more good coffee, I said carefully, but teaching takes the same dedication as making. It can't be rushed. Sarah arrived with her teenage son, Thomas, who'd recently shown interest in the coffee world. Uncle James, he said, could I? Could I apprentice here on weekends? Dad says I should intern at the bank, but I saw Richard flinch slightly at his son's words, remembering perhaps his own dismissed dreams. We start at 5 a.m., I told Thomas. Cleaning, setup, learning the basics. No shortcuts. The boy's face lit up. Really? Dad, can I? Richard looked at his son, then at me, then at the thriving shop around us. Sometimes, he said quietly, the best investment isn't in stocks. The afternoon brought Catherine again, this time alone. She watched me work the roaster, the same machine she'd once called a waste of garage space during our marriage. I get it now, she said. Why you were so obsessed with coffee. It's not just drinks, is it? It's craft. Art. I monitored the bean's color development. It's about doing one thing perfectly. Something I should have learned earlier in life. The London journalist approached before leaving. Mr. Sullivan, he said, I came here to write about the death of craft coffee. I'll be writing about its renaissance instead. That evening, after closing, I held a special training session. Sarah, Richard, Thomas, and even Mike stayed late to learn about coffee origins and roasting profiles. The secret, I told them, watching the beans transform in the roaster, isn't in any single thing. It's in caring about every detail, every time. Richard, his tie loosened, took notes with the same intensity he once reserved for market analysis. It's like what we tell investors, he mused. The fundamentals matter more than rapid growth. Sarah, who'd become a regular at our Sunday tastings, added, and authenticity. People can taste the difference between passion and production. Thomas, already showing a natural talent for latte art, asked, Uncle James, is it true you turn down offers from big coffee chains to buy your recipes? Can't sell what's not for sale, I replied, checking the bean's development. Some things are worth more than money. The next morning, I arrived at my usual time, 4:30 a.m., to find Thomas already waiting. I couldn't sleep, he admitted, too excited about learning. We spent that morning on the basics, cleaning equipment, understanding water temperature, learning the importance of precision in every step. The boy absorbed everything with an enthusiasm I recognized from my own early days of coffee obsession. Around mid-morning, Richard came in, not to check on his son, but to get his daily coffee. He watched Thomas carefully weigh beans for a pour-over. He reminds me of you, Richard said quietly. The way you were before we all told you to be practical. I showed Thomas how to adjust his pouring technique. Sometimes practical isn't practical at all. The day brought our usual mix of regulars and coffee tourists, each served with the same care. The London journalist's article had gone live, bringing a new wave of interested customers. Sarah arrived with the proof for our feature in Coffee Culture magazine. The cover showed me at the roaster, fully focused on the bean's development. You look happy, she said, studying the photo. Happier than I've seen you in years. Because I am, I replied, starting another roasting batch. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, my old boss from Morgan Stanley. James, he said, taking in the busy shop, I thought you'd lost your mind when you left. But this is something special. I prepared his coffee personally, a single-origin Ethiopian pour-over that had taken months to perfect. Sometimes, I told him, you have to trust your instincts. As the day wound down, I gathered my small team, Mike, Thomas, and 2 new trainees, for our daily cupping session. What we do here, I explained, watching them evaluate the coffee, isn't just about drinks. It's about respect. For the beans, for the process, for each customer. Richard and Sarah stayed for the session, both now regular participants in our educational programs. You've created more than a coffee shop, Richard said afterward. You've created a movement. I cleaned the roaster, preparing it for tomorrow's batches. No movement. Just good coffee. Because sometimes the biggest impact comes from doing the smallest things perfectly, and the best response to mockery is quiet excellence. 1 year after opening the Daily Grind, I stood behind my counter preparing for a special anniversary event. Not a celebration of profits or expansion plans, but a gathering to honor what the shop had become. A sanctuary for coffee craft and authentic connections. Thomas, now our weekend apprentice, carefully weighed beans for the morning's first roast. Richard watched his son with pride, his Wall Street journals replaced by coffee trade magazines whenever he visited. Uncle James, Thomas said, checking the roaster temperature, I decided. I'm going to study food science in college, not finance. Richard, surprisingly, nodded. Sometimes the best investments are in passion, not portfolios. Sarah arrived early, carrying a frame. Inside was my original business plan, the one they'd all mocked, along with the first dollar we'd earned. She added the recent Coffee Culture magazine cover and our James Beard Foundation recognition. For the wall, she said simply, to remind everyone that dreams don't have expiration dates. The anniversary celebration wasn't a grand affair. No celebrity appearances or promotional gimmicks. Instead, we hosted a day of coffee education, sharing our knowledge with anyone interested in learning. Mike led the latte art demonstrations while I conducted roasting workshops. Each session was intimate, focused, perfect, just like every cup we served. Catherine came with David, her new husband, and now a regular customer. James, she said, watching me work the roaster, remember when I called this your midlife crisis? I was wrong. This was your midlife awakening. The shop filled with a mix of regulars and newcomers. Professional baristas learned alongside curious beginners. Richard's investment friends chatted with local artists. Sarah's country club acquaintances shared tables with college students. This is what success looks like, Richard mused, watching the diverse crowd. Not franchises or stock options, but community. Between sessions, I found quiet moments to reflect. The Daily Grind had never been about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving something to myself, that passion and precision matter more than scale and status. Thomas approached with his latest roasting attempt. I think I finally got it right, Uncle James. The flavor profile you taught me. I cupped the coffee carefully, noting the complexity, the balance. You didn't just get it right, I told him. You made it your own. Sarah, who'd become our Sunday morning roasting student, added, that's what the Daily Grind taught us all. Success isn't copying others. It's finding your own perfect recipe. As the day wound down, my family gathered around the cupping table. Not to mock or question, but to share in what the Daily Grind had become. To pathetic dreams, Richard toasted with his cup of single-origin Ethiopian. To perfect cups, Sarah added. To following your passion, Thomas chimed in. I looked around at my transformed family. Richard with his coffee-stained notebook, Sarah in her barista apron, Thomas confidently working the roaster. Because sometimes the biggest victories aren't in proving critics wrong, but in showing them a better way to be right. The next morning, I arrived at my usual time, ready to start another day of perfect cups and genuine connections. Thomas was already there, learning, growing, carrying the passion forward. And in the quiet morning light, as the first beans of the day began to roast, I smiled at how a pathetic dream had transformed not just my life, but the lives of those around me. Because sometimes the best success story isn't about getting bigger, but about getting better, one perfect cup at a time.